Mr. President, Excellencies, I have the honor to address the General Assembly on behalf of the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis and to add our fraternal voice to this extremely important debate on Agenda Item 36, entitled The Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial, and Financial Embargo Imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. St. Kitts and Nevis aligns itself with the statements made by the CARICOM, the G77 in China, the CELAC, and the non-aligned movement. Mr. President, St. Kitts and Nevis has traditionally had good relations with the United States of America. It remains one of our oldest, closest, and strongest partners. We respect the role that it plays in international relations and in the establishment and promotion of the principles and values of this body. St. Kitts and Nevis is proud to be the birthplace of Alexander Hamilton, whose legacy lends itself to the higher calling of respect and dignity. It is for this reason that we welcome the previous steps made by Cuba and the United States of America to normalize their diplomatic relations, which included the decision to remove Cuba from the list of state sponsors of terrorism in 2015. This marked a historic turning point in the easing of tensions between such close neighbors and inspired a new dawn of economic liberalization measures, peaceful coexistence, and people-to-people exchanges between the two countries that were so meaningful and beneficial to the Cuban and Caribbean people. However, St. Kitts and Nevis finds it regrettable that several reversals were made since that brief period of détente, and the blockade is still a reality for the Cuban people, and it denounces the imposition of unilateral coercive measures against a sovereign state. This unjust embargo drives a stake through the heart of international law, makes a mockery of the principles of sovereignty and non-intervention that governs interstate relations, which are protected by the United Nations Charter, and severely impedes Cuba's ability to fully engage the international community to adequately provide basic public services for its people and thereby its aspirations for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. The fact that we are addressing this item yet again today underscores the indispensable role that the United Nations plays as a vital interlocutor and leader in international affairs. St. Kitts and Nevis remains ever grateful that within these our United Nations, there remains a space where member states, large and small, must work to protect the interests of the global population, where small island developing states like St. Kitts and Nevis and Cuba can continue to find a place of shelter and succor, and large states could be looked in the eye and urged to act with a sense of responsibility and accountability. Mr. President, we consider the financial, commercial, and economic embargo as an extreme burden on the development, well-being, and stability of our brothers and sisters in Cuba, and indeed the entire Caribbean. The socioeconomic impact on the economy on that small island developing state is quite profound and unfair to the people of Cuba. In trying to achieve the 2030 agenda, this is a critical time for the world, given the cumulative impact of 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic and the disproportionate and deleterious impacts and risks presented by intensified geopolitical hostilities in Ukraine and the global crises in food, fuel, and transportation it has fomented. The stability of the international order is one predicated upon peace between and among nations, and the economic blockade of Cuba, for all intents and purposes, constitutes a hostile act to regional and hemispheric cohesion. That the continued extraterritorial application of the Helms-Burton Act, including its Title III, constitutes a major obstacle to the normal development of Cuba is undeniable. The report of the Secretary General documents and confirms the high cost of this policy for the country and its people. The millions of dollars in annual losses to critical sectors such as the health, education, energy, and banking and financial sectors as a result of sanctions are also well documented. The efforts that have been made by the Biden administration to ease the chokehold of some of the more draconian measures imposed by the previous administration are commendable, but they do not go far enough in addressing the more harmful aspects of the blockade. These coercive measures, coupled with the harsh economic and social conditions caused by the pandemic, have produced mass despair among the people and have led to a new migrant exodus from Cuba. That is why St. Kitts and Nevis once again calls upon the United States to end the unjust embargo. It is said that an unjust law is no law at all. And in the words of one of America's most notable founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, the international community not only has a right to disobey it, but we are obliged so to do. For the moment, we choose only to express our righteous indignation at its imposition. Mr. President, in case anyone doubted our interconnection as a human family who breathe the same air, have the same oceans, which is the lifeblood of our shared planet, confront the artificiality of geographical boundaries, or accept that trade and commerce are essential to the viability and prosperity of every nation, regardless of its politics, COVID-19, with all its consequences, presented us with a powerful reminder. It is this human interconnection which compels every nation and every person to be their brothers and sisters' keepers, if not out of magnanimity, then out of enlightened self-interest, for in their security and well-being reside our own. For us in the Caribbean and Latin America, the economic, financial, and commercial blockade against Cuba most certainly runs contrary to our people's desire for peace, as enshrined in the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. As a globalized and interdependent global community, we cannot afford for any country to be left behind. This is a time for international cooperation and pooling resources to assist each other in facing the challenges we have in common. It is undeniable that during the global pandemic, Cuba proved itself to be an exemplary and benevolent global citizen and tangibly demonstrated its humanistic outlook. Cuba's benevolence was even further demonstrated through its own contribution in the race to find a vaccine. Not only did it develop 5 domestic vaccines, 2 of which were eventually approved for international use and were offered to those nations unable to afford other, more expensive doses. In the face of such magnanimity, altruism, and compassion that can be counted in the many lives saved, not lost, how can Cuba justifiably continue to be designated by the United States as a state sponsor of terrorism? Surely, this unwarranted and even neo-colonial designation and the attendant sanctions attached to it defies all logic, reasons, and indeed the spirit of the United Nations. St. Kitts and Nevis has had a deep and enduring relationship with the government and people of Cuba and has benefited immensely from cooperation in many areas, including but not limited to health, agriculture, and education. As a country just emerging from a general election on August 5th, we have Cuba to thank for providing a scholarship to an intelligent, compassionate, and honest young man of very humble beginnings who was able to beat the odds and obtain a medical degree and become not only one of our nation's finest internists, but also our country's 4th Prime Minister. As the newly appointed, youngest, and first female permanent representative of St. Kitts and Nevis to the United Nations, I too owe my ability to deliver my speech from this platform to Cuba. It was only 5 short months ago, in May of this year, that I lay in the surgical ward awaiting surgery to remove my right eyeball. It is only because of the highly knowledgeable, gallant, and dedicated efforts of my Cuban optician, offering her services virtually free of charge, that I was able to save my eye. So again, Mr. President, I ask the question, what justifies Cuba, a small Caribbean nation, which has had such a disproportionately positive impact on the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, and whose internationalism and humanitarianism has saved, impacted, and empowered so many human lives? What justifies it continuing to be burdened and limited by an outdated embargo? St. Kitts and Nevis, which is among the smallest states in the world, knows and understands the power of one. One tree can start a forest. One smile can begin a friendship. One hand can lift a soul. One candle can wipe out darkness. One touch can show you care. One life can make all the difference. So today we lift our voices as one nation in solidarity with our good friend Cuba to support the resolution A77L5 in hopes to influence the unanimous support of 192 countries and the great United States to end once and for all the unjust embargo. I thank you.